Hello guys, welcome to Manhua Mantra. Before we dive into today's episode of Magic Emperor Chapter 700, I have something important to share. If you're new to my channel and wondering where to start the Magic Emperor novel after Manhwa, Chapter 649, then you can continue the story with the novel starting from Chapter 639. I've added the link to the novel-based explanation in the description below and pinned it in the comments section for your convenience. Now, without further ado, let's dive into Magic Emperor Chapter 700. In the previous chapter, we saw Shen return to Fan, revealing his failure to retrieve the sacred sword despite wounding the Exalted. Fan, caught off guard, tried to flatter Shen while nervously wondering about his true intentions. Let's begin the chapter. Shen smiled faintly, his hazy eyes glinting as he chuckled and muttered under his breath. Rotten brat, spare me the flattery. A loss or even a draw is still a loss. It's not enough to be worthy of the sacred sword. And now, the stakes will only get worse in my next fight. Fan, curious, couldn't resist asking, Senior, do you have another battle coming up? Shen nodded solemnly. The strongest in the central area, invincible sword. Surviving 10 of his moves would already be an achievement. Fan was taken aback. Senior, you're incredibly strong. You can't even handle 10 moves against him? Just how powerful is this man? Is the gap between the best in the western lands and the central area really so vast? Shen sighed deeply and took a long gulp of wine. Kid, you're still too green, youthful, arrogant. But let me tell you something. There's always someone stronger out there. Being the best in the western lands amounts to nothing in the central area. Over there, even the 10th strongest would laugh at the so-called strongest of the West. The weight of Shen's words left Fan momentarily speechless. He wasn't just surprised at the disparity in strength. It was the vast gap between regions that shocked him. For someone like Fan, who had been a demonic emperor in the sacred domain and faced countless experts, this revelation felt akin to a child sitting on a treasure hoard only to find a towering thug as their neighbor. No one in their right mind could ever feel safe in such a situation. It dawned on him how easily someone could take everything from under his nose. But a question lingered in his mind. Why is the central area so much stronger? Shen noticed his troubled expression and smirked knowingly. You're wondering why the central area stands out, aren't you? Fan nodded without a word. Shen's tone turned serious. It's their structure. He paused briefly, letting the weight of his words sink in before continuing. The 4 regions are governed by sects, each with hundreds of empires under them. They're fragmented forces at best. When wars break out, it's the empires, not the sects, that fight. Have you ever heard of sects going to war? Fan nodded slowly, digesting this. Shen pressed on, his voice firmer. But the central area? That's a completely different story. There's a monstrous figure ruling there, the Sword Star Empire, founded 10,000 years ago by none other than Invincible Sword himself. That empire didn't just spring up overnight. He swallowed all the surrounding nations and sects until the entire region became unified under one banner. Fan's eyes widened. An entire region ruled by a single empire? That's incredible. Shen nodded. Exactly. With no internal conflicts and all resources focused on growth, their development naturally surpassed the other regions. It's a feat that none of the other lands could achieve. Look at the western lands. The Double Dragon Supremes are powerful, sure, but they're merely cultivators. They lack the vision and cunning needed to unite the entire region. He gave Fan a long, pointed look before placing a heavy hand on his shoulder. Kid, you have ambition. I can see it in your eyes. There's even a trace of that old freak's nature in you. Gather your allies, claim your territory, but you'd better hurry. The central area won't wait for you. It'll still take them some time to make their move, but you're young, you're out of time. Fan's brow furrowed. Are you saying that the Central Area's plans will involve me? Shen chuckled darkly. That old freak spent thousands of years expanding his empire to dominate the Central Area. Now he has set his sights on the world. Everyone will be affected, whether they want to be or not. Even if you choose to hide, what about those girls? What about Tianyu? Can they hide? He turned to leave, his voice fading but his words cutting deep. The future of the Western lands may very well be in your hands, but if you're not ready, it might just belong to your enemies instead. Prepare yourself, kid. You don't want to regret it later. Shen stood at the doorway, glancing back one final time. I've wasted enough time here. Let's see if fate favors the Western lands this time. With that, he disappeared into the distance, leaving Fan to grapple with his words. Fan stood there, his heart heavy. He had wanted nothing more than to focus on cultivating and one day return to the sacred domain. But now, chaos loomed over the 5 lands, threatening to drag everyone into its storm. For someone like Fan, a lone wolf by nature, it wouldn't have mattered much. But the Luo clan, they'd inevitably be caught in the crossfire. His mind churned. I need to prepare, just in case. Then I'll leave in peace. Shen's parting words echoed in his ears. Treasure your people. Fan scoffed, his face flushing slightly. What does a demon care about people? I'm not concerned. About some girl. Shen's mocking laughter rang in his memory. Ha! Whether you're demonic or righteous doesn't matter. You're still human. Don't live to regret it. 3 days passed. Fan remained in his room, focused on cultivating. His wounds were healing well, though they still needed time. During this period, sects from the Double Dragon Gathering began departing. Members of the Demon Soul Sect and Sword God Sect came to bid farewell to Fan, offering him their wishes for a swift recovery. Fan nodded, his expression calm but thoughtful. These sects are like family now. Kui Lang and the others will have to learn to nurture these relationships. With that in mind, he turned his focus inward. It was almost time to return to the Luo clan. Just then, a familiar voice interrupted his thoughts. Fan, Shuangger and I are heading back to Tianyu. When do you plan to leave? He opened the door to see Yongning standing there, her usual cheerfulness masking a hint of concern. I'll need about 10 more days to recover before I can leave without worries, Fan replied, his tone even. At ease, huh? Who's after you this time? Yongning teased. Fan chuckled. Who knows? I have plenty of enemies. Better safe than sorry. The girls nodded in agreement. Fan's journey had certainly left him with no shortage of foes. It was only natural to take precautions. Well then, we'll go on ahead, Yongning said, waving with a smile. Her bright eyes, however, hinted at something else. Fan raised an eyebrow. You're not afraid to travel back to Tianyu alone? Maybe. You should wait a few days and we'll go together. Yongning perked up at his suggestion, but Shuang'er quickly tugged at her sleeve. She hesitated before smiling awkwardly. It's fine. Sister Ching is traveling with us. We'll have plenty to talk about, like how to figure you out and win your favor. Her face turned crimson as she realized what she'd said, quickly covering her mouth. Fan frowned. Is Mystical Heaven Sect leaving too? Shen's words about treasuring people resurfaced, and Fan made a decision. He stood abruptly, motioning for the girls to follow him. They soon arrived at the Mystical Heaven Sect's quarters, where disciples were gathered, ready to depart. Shui Ruohua noticed Fan and nudged Chu Ching, who turned around to meet his gaze. Her usually calm demeanor faltered as she smiled softly and walked toward him. How are you feeling? She asked gently. Fan's tone was cold but not unkind. Much better? Why ask now? Isn't it a little late for concern? Chu Ching's lips curved into a teasing smile. You've never liked small talk? Why are you complaining now? Zhuo Fan stared into her eyes, his voice dropping slightly. Give me half a year, then I'll give you an answer to that question. Without waiting for her reply, he turned and walked away. Ching stood frozen for a moment before her face lit up with a radiant smile. Tears glistened in her eyes as she whispered to herself. He finally faltered. Her teammates watched, in shock as their typically stoic companion floated back to them, her joy evident. Xuan Xiaoyu, standing off to the side, clenched his fists. Half a year, is it? That's perfect.